Welcome back to the County News Podcast. I'm Charlie Band. We're continuing our series on the challenges that public lands county officials face and the insight they can offer from their experiences. This series is presented in cooperation with NACo's National Center for Public Lands Counties. I spoke to two leaders from counties known for outdoor recreation, Supervisor John Peters from Mono County, California, and Commissioner Sonja Macys from Routt County, Colorado. Peters is the current Western Interstate Region president. Supervisor Peters, tell us about Mono County, California, how public lands impact your county and your district.
Mono County is located in the Eastern Sierra. It's a very remote part of California bordering Nevada. We go from the high alpine peaks to the low desert, and Mono County is 94% public lands. So we have a very small amount of land to collect tax base from, to develop, and to use for purposes that create wealth for the county. We rely on our property tax base and our transient occupancy tax for our budget, for our general fund budget. And we have anywhere from 3 to 5 million visitors come through our county in any given year and need to support them with county services and infrastructure. We have a population of 14,000 people in our county of 3,300 square miles. The primary managers of our public lands are the U.S. Forest Service, USDA, and Department of Interior between BLM and the National Park Service, with some state parks. And we also have a large ag economy. It's a distant second to our tourism economy. But much of that private land is under conservation easements. So there's restrictions on development and growth for any economic base based on the conservation easements that are placed on those lands.
What draws visitors to Mono County?
What draws visitors is what drew me there. It's the sheer beauty. It's the isolation from the typical, experience that you're going to have in California, in the West, where you don't have the crowds except in specific targeted spaces, like in the Yosemite Valley. You have vast open areas. We have what's called the Sawtooth Ridge in the Bridgeport Valley that's nicknamed the Alps of the Sierra. We just have unique landscapes and opportunities for outdoor recreation, from simple horseback ride and a walk to extreme sports like, alpine skiing, hiking ice climbing. It's the vast array of outdoor recreational opportunities, including traditional activities like hiking and fishing, hunting to a lesser degree.
But such a large recreational drive, what are some of your major challenges and opportunities related to those lands?
Well, I would say what permeates throughout the West, not just Mono County, is our housing crisis, our inability to develop new housing stock, to provide affordable housing for our workforce, and just our residents. We have a huge second homeowner base, which does provide a good property tax base, but it takes housing stock out of the market, and it's very difficult to develop new housing when there's very little, or in some cases in my district, parts of my district where there is no infrastructure, no sewer, water, you're solely on wells, and it's just the lack of land, and it's difficult to attract workers, to attract people to come and live and work, send their kids to school in Mono County because of the situation with housing. And it's often, it's a very limiting factor for many because of that. Even though your work-life balance is incredible, we can't provide on a local convenient as people that come from places where just simply going to the supermarket or the dentist or the pharmacy is going a couple of blocks. That's a 10-minute journey, where we have services that are, necessities up to an hour and more just to get to get to those services.
How important is forest health to the viability of these lands, and what advice would you give to a new county official regarding how you work with federal land managers?
Yeah, forest resiliency it's a primary concern, and it really what the advice I would give is you have to work collaboratively. You have to figure out a way to pull together all of the entities where resources can be channeled. You have nonprofits, you have foundations, NGOs, and money flows through many different channels, and it's easy to get siloed, and the land managers themselves really don't have the resources and the capacity to have the continuity of keeping our landscape maintained in a resilient manner that will look at long-term solutions for large landscapes like Mono County has. So it's figuring out how to make the projects, the programs that can provide forest resiliency, long-term sustainable projects that can, when different players come in and different money channels and sources come and go, that you can still maintain your momentum to get the actual work on the ground done.
Speaking of capacity, the U.S. Forest Service has seen its capacity decrease a little bit with the labor force reductions. How have you seen that materialize in Mono County?
Well, in Mono County, we sort of we saw the writing on the wall many years ago. We created a sustainable recreation coordinator position that helps to integrate county public works staff and seasonal staff through this sustainable recreation office with Forest Service and BLM infrastructure maintenance, ongoing maintenance, just toilets, trash, trailhead upkeep. And so we're constantly coordinating projects and looking forward to creating new trails, new recreational opportunities, but really helping to maintain what we have. And the Forest Service, it's always a challenge, and I'll go back to housing, to have a sustainable long-term workforce. It's a very cumbersome process just to hire somebody to work seasonally in an office, in a remote area like the Bridgeport District, Ranger District. And we are trying as a county to work together with our land managers to have bridges to get to what needs to be done, which is opening federal lands, opening campgrounds, keeping them maintained, working with concessionaires, working with our rangers and our BLM personnel to just provide these services and to keep things open in a timely manner, open through our season. We're very seasonal, especially up in the north part of the county where I am. You have a short period of time to accommodate the tourism, and we above all, we want the visitor experience to be top-notch. We have programs like Camp Like a Pro, where we've established protocol, collateral, brochures for the for the recreating public, the camping public, to understand the impacts of coming into public lands with RVs or off the grid camping, out of developed camp areas. So helping to coach them to do that, because there just isn't the Forest Service personnel. We don't have a law enforcement officer dedicated to our ranger district. They're spread out over hundreds of thousands of acres. And so we have to work together with our local law enforcement, our local search and rescue, to help provide those services for when they're needed.
And I imagine those hundreds of thousands of acres dispersed throughout the mountains make it even harder to get from place to place.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of our area and why people come there. They can find solitude. They can find, their happy place in the mountains. But it doesn't come without risk, and we're constantly working collaboratively with our other agency partners, whether it's other counties, other forests. My district borders and our county includes 2 regions of the forest, and something I've been advocating since I've been a supervisor and before that is working across regions, kind of cutting down the limitations that these regions present to themselves. It's working within districts and having forest supervisors talk to other forest supervisors and regional foresters talk to their counterparts, so that projects can be streamlined and that we're really working together to accomplish the same regional goals and not necessarily looking at borders. The deer or the sage grouse don't know when they're crossing from Region 4 to Region 5 in the forest, and neither do our visitors. And so we have to figure out ways to really streamline and create efficiencies by having better collaboration amongst and within the land manager agencies.
The Western Interstate Region plays a large part in the direction of the National Center for Public Lands Counties, and the center's now in its second year of operation. What are some of the new developments the center's come out with, and how can the Public Lands County officials benefit from the work the center's doing?
I think first and foremost is that the public officials, counties, local governments, especially in areas where there's a lot of public lands, but also just in regions where there's a lot of public lands, need to engage first. They need to engage with the Knowledge Hub and be informed of what the National Center for Public Lands can do for you. And it's telling the story. It's telling the story of what it takes to work together, whether it's resource management plans or good neighbor authority agreements. How do we work together with the Forest Service? How do we approach today and where we're at with our land managers and have a plan for tomorrow? And I think the best way to do that, and the approach that our director and our board at the Western Interstate Region-driven National Center for Public Lands is doing, is taking the historical perspective of many of the ways that these land managers were formed initially, and what was their purpose, what was the intent with the agencies and how they managed the lands, and trying to figure out ways to prevent issues that come up and basically stall out collaborative agreements with local government and our federal partners. We need to figure out a way to cut through the red tape to really drive home the intent, which, it's the land of many uses. It's, we have to acknowledge that there's got to be compatible uses on our public lands that recognize the kind of what the desire is of the public, what drives the economy of the areas where these public lands exist, and using the tools that the National Center for Public Lands is creating and is establishing, which is it's a database of information and tools that can be applied to your local area. It may not be something that has been done before in your local area, but if you're drawing in and you're wanting to figure out how do you clear some timber on some roads where there was a major wind event and you can't get that road open because you don't know how to manage the formal agreement with the Forest Service to go in and utilize the resources that you know are available, whether it's sawyers or local people that have backhoes and trucks. How do you do it? Well, you have to figure out a way to have that plan, and that plan has already been implemented, accomplished, and exists, and that will exist in the database of the National Center for Public Lands. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to go and start with a blank slate. You can see a tool and have access to a tool at no additional cost to you or your county, and use that to start the planning and the project that you need to accomplish in your local area.
One last question about Mono County. What is the single biggest bottleneck, federal bottleneck that if removed could vastly improve operations in Mono County?
I think that it's communication. It's how do you ensure that you can create appropriate and sustainable communication with the partners so that everybody feels that they can come to the table. Nothing is punitive. You can be open and honest about where your agency is, where your local government is, where the NGO is, in this with specifics about what you need to accomplish. And often these things, they don't happen overnight. They don't happen necessarily in one season of construction. And so there has to be continuity. And as you know, as the players change, the landscape doesn't. The needs don't change. The visiting public doesn't change in the experience they're looking for when they come to recreate. The local business that needs to be thriving because it's being supported by the activities on public lands doesn't change. But we have to figure out a way to communicate across all of these different channels and coalesce them into the single conversation that is drive the relationships between public lands agencies, local governments, local leaders, to find the end of to have the end be the means of collaboration and communication. And using the tools of the National Center for the Public Lands is one great tool to help accomplish that.
That was John Peters, a Mono County, California supervisor and president of the Western Interstate Region. Now here's my conversation with Routt County, Colorado Commissioner Sonja Macys. Commissioner Macys, tell us about Routt County and how your public lands affect county management.
Well, Routt County has actually 60% of our county in public lands. The majority of those, of course, are in federal or state hands. We have 47% with the U.S. Forest Service, which is largely the Routt Medicine Bow National Forest. And then we have 5 state parks, in addition to some other federal lands, Bureau of Land Management. So our community loves its public lands. In addition to the protected areas that are federally and state protected, we also have private conserved lands. Routt County has a purchase of development rights program, and we are able to help landowners offset the cost of maintaining those lands in exchange for conservation easements. So up to 18% of our private land is now conserved. So our community is fanatical about public lands. We really like to use them for all kinds of different recreational uses, agricultural uses, and there is, of course, a pretty significant tourism base in Routt County. Our county is only about 26,000 permanent residents, but we're learning more and more that the public lands attract upwards of 2 million visitors each year. So they play a huge role in our economy. But in addition, we do see some impacts of this increased visitation that we might not have if we were talking about just maintaining roads and services for 26,000 people, our local residents.
Yeah, I know people talk a lot about Steamboat Springs and the skiing there, but I personally know a lot of people who've visited Routt County during the summer just to get out and see the trails and be in Western Colorado.
Yeah, the summer is becoming as popular as winter, and we do have everything from mountain biking to gravel biking to wildflower watching, bird watching. Increasingly, we're seeing festivals crop up. We have the Yampa Valley Crane Festival every year, which is becoming quite popular. So a lot of folks do come for the skiing, and then they stay one summer and realize that it's a wonderful place to live year-round.
How do you enjoy using the public lands in Routt County?
Well, I guess my uses have differed over time. I used to be a downhiller on my mountain bike, but these days I'm sort of getting more into the cross-country skiing and the mellower things. I do love to go on our ski area, which of course operates with a special use permit from the Routt National Forest. That's just out my backyard. And I'm a horseback rider as well, and we do have some incredible opportunities for multiple use for hikers, bikers, horseback riders, and campers.
So you've been in office for a little bit. What advice do you have, or would you give to a new county official coming into a situation like yours, where their county has a lot of public lands, and you have different relationships with different land management agencies? What advice would you have for somebody coming into that situation?
Well, in my case, my background is in natural resources management, so I've been working with agencies quite a lot. And I think one of the most important things is to really understand the different agencies and be in constant communication with them. Each of the federal agencies has a slightly different mandate, as do the state parks. And so what is important to them? What are they working on? What do they need support from the county with? Are there places where we can collaborate? In our situation, we have wildfire as a significant risk. So we're always trying to make sure that we are collaborating with our state forest, our national forest on wildfire mitigation. That's important not just for obviously human safety, but our drainage, the Fish Creek drainage, is the water supply for our largest municipality, which is Steamboat Springs. And similarly, in the South Routt area, Sheriff's Reservoir, which was recently actually in some jeopardy from the Croshow fire. That was a fire that we just got under control with the help of our agency partners. But it really did have the capacity to put water sources at risk for our smaller communities. So, we're seeing that the more that we're talking to the agencies and working together where we can, the better off we are. And, just to give you an example, at the end of the month here in September, we're going to be doing a little bit of a recreation summit up in North Routt County. And that's where we have Forest Service lands, state parks, and all of these are accessed by county roads. So the county has had an outsized share in helping to plow the roads, maintain the roads, plow parking lots for snowmobile traffic, and we're starting to see that we're getting to a pinch point with all of this work. So with this summit, we're hoping to talk to residents and really see where can we lean on each other, we the agencies, to increase enforcement where it's appropriate, signage where it's appropriate, maybe even open new trails with the help of some of the volunteer groups who focus on that. So this constant communication, open door policies, and making sure that you are recognizing that they can be a good, strong partner in getting things done.
Sounds like it's a good opportunity to get everybody on the same page and get some ideas flowing when everybody's in the same place.
Yeah, we've been traditionally pretty good at creating coalitions of diverse types of folks and bringing people together to advance shared objectives. For example, we have the Routt Conservation Recreation Roundtable, which really came out of a conflict situation in which mountain bikers and then other users were playing a bit of a tug of war with a particular area on the Forest Service. And so we decided to get the community together and have a representational coalition that now has robust participation from all users. And through that Routt Conservation Recreation Roundtable, we are able to talk through some of the issues, think about where to direct recreation, where to not direct recreation. And this has become the vehicle for receiving state funding through what Colorado is calling regional partnership initiatives. So they've just rolled out this opportunity for these regional partnerships like our coalition to receive significant funding to advance this conservation that is collaborative in nature.
Sounds like you're really, turning lemons into lemonade and a crisis into an opportunity for growth.
That's what we do here in small towns.
Along the same lines, Routt County's Wildfire Mitigation Council has put together a draft for its recovery playbook. What have you and the rest of the county taken from that process to help prepare for building resilience and recovery procedures in the event of a wildfire?
Well, our emergency management department is really the one who takes the lead on those efforts, and they have been incredibly well activated, given that we just had some pretty significant fires in Rio Blanco and in Routt County. And really what we've pulled together is a strong and solid interagency management team who is constantly trading on the best ways to respond, the best ways to communicate, the best ways to prepare for casualties, to prepare for evacuations. We have a pretty well documented plan in place when we have to deal with the actual event. In the case of our recent fires, that event quickly moved from Routt County Emergency Management scale to the state and then on to the feds. But we do have a clear pathway as to what to do, who is responsible, at which point do we hand that over, what do the financial responsibilities look like. So that's really in the emergency management side. And Routt County worked very closely with Rio Blanco to help them. They were in a bit of a transition with their emergency management team. And so it was useful to have a very strong structure. On the preparedness and the resilience side, one of the things that we do here is we use the Good Neighbor Authority. So the authority by which other agencies can collaborate on one another's lands to make sure that they're making the most effective use of their time and resources in wildfire mitigation. So our Colorado State Forest Service and the U.S. Forest Service work really closely, again, through the coalition to identify places that need to be cleaned up, that need to be, there are high hazard areas that need to be mitigated. And of course, Routt County supports them as we can, mostly with making sure that access to those roadways is available and providing the resources that we might have from an equipment or a staffing perspective.
Okay. Obviously, working with federal agencies is a huge part of everything you do there. But a lot of those agencies have seen workforce reductions over the last few months. How has that affected that relationship and that working process?
Well, we are struggling with the reduction in force in all of the federal agencies. I think the most acute that we've seen recently, of course, has been in the Natural Resource Conservation Service, where federal funding had been coming through that agency to private landowners to do proactive things on their lands, like noxious weed management, like fire mitigation, and also just general consultation with those landowners for best practices in grazing management and so on and so forth. That office has been significantly reduced and really now does not even have the capacity to do that type of outreach. So landowners are struggling there, and our extension office here at the county has been really working hard to try to make up on some of the areas where it can as far as providing resources and technical assistance. But there's just nothing like having that agency who has the direct link to those federal funds working with that landowner. And of course, we had talked earlier about the Forest Service and the closing of the Forest Service office. Fortunately, that closing was short-lived, but Forest Service office, as you enter Steamboat Springs coming down off of Rabbit Ears Pass, had traditionally been the first stop for folks to come in and pick up resources, whether that's maps, guidebooks, to get permits, all of that type of thing, to get education about camping and fire bans. And that office was closed in the spring for a period of time. And it was a real challenge to think about how these visitors would become educated about the areas they were trying to get to, any kind of hazards that might exist. And so we did have a struggle there, and we all pulled together and just did the best we can to direct people elsewhere. Fortunately, that office is open again. We don't know for how long. And I will say that for the visitation management, it seems like people are doing the best they can, doing less with more. And the fire management, and particularly on the recent Crow Show fire that we saw here, was very well handled by our federal partners. So we were pleasantly surprised to see that the fire really was properly addressed and that there were resources for that.
With that recent temporary closure, had that gotten the county thinking about how it would try to fill in some of that gap, some of those missing services in the event of a longer closure, or is there any way that the county can make up for the loss in services if that happens again?
Well, we're really fortunate to have good partnerships with nonprofit agencies that might be a little better prepared for that. For example, here in Schema Springs at that Forest Service office, there's an organization called Yepatika that runs the nature store there. So when the office closed, effectively their nature store was shut down. So we were thinking, would there be a way that we could deploy them to be more of a frontline resource to people staffing that store more productively? And when I say more productively, typically the Yepatika folks stock the store and the Forest Service personnel would sell the products and provide the education. So did that model need to change? The other thing we had talked about and have not yet had to do is we do have an organization called the Rocky Mountain Youth Corps, and they are actually prepared to do visitation management on site at the forest and have done it with other areas. So, they have a youth corps program, bring in youth to do trail maintenance and management, but they did make a shift a couple years back when this trend started to happen as far as defunding of our public lands, and they started to help their youth become more skilled in visitation management. So everything from literally staffing the front entrance and collecting fees to cleaning the toilets and everything in between.
Wow. I mean, everyone knows how to do everything at that point. In terms of, obviously, Routt County's looks at federal lands as a major asset, but, there's some liabilities that come from this back and forth with the federal government. When does the asset become a liability in terms of the staffing and resources?
I think one of the things that is a challenge for counties, of course, is that when you have these federal public lands, they're taken off the tax rolls. So counties like Routt County that are primarily funded by property tax, we can't assess property taxes on these federal lands. So there is a loss of resources that comes along with them. Now, of course, we're all aware that there is something called payment in lieu of taxes that does come to our counties to partially offset that loss of property tax. In our case, that payment in lieu of taxes makes up about 26% of our road and bridge budget. But it's really still not sufficient. When you think about the influx of visitors, if we were maintaining our roads to a certain standard for 26,000 residents, that would be one thing. But to be maintaining those roads to a standard for 26,000 plus 2 million annually really puts us in a different category of need for staff and need for resources. And we've recognized that we are at a tipping point where we are not going to be able to continue to maintain the level of service that we currently have without additional funding. So we are looking at every single avenue. In fact, looking at a lodging tax to be placed on the ballot in November. That would be a countywide lodging tax of 6% that would be used for public infrastructure and safety. And that really does come on the heels of just seeing that visitation needs to pay its way, that it is impacting our roadways, it's impacting our need for enforcement, signage, etc. And so we look to recover those costs through those avenues. We also have an opportunity to add a $2 a day fee onto day use passes at state parks. This will yield a small amount of money because most of our people have annual passes, but it is chipping away at the edges to try to see if we can make our road and bridge budget a little more whole, make our public safety budget a little more whole, given the impact of the activity that visitation is.
Yeah, it sounds like you're examining all options to keep your county whole.
Yeah, we are. And, I recognize that Colorado's examples might not always be the easiest for others to think about because many different counties have different models as to what they are allowed to do. We are a statutory county, meaning that we are established by statute. And so in order for us to be able to do some of these things that we're doing, like the lodging tax and like the fee on the passes, we did have to go through our state legislature. And so it wasn't a quick process. This is something we've been working on for the past couple of years. It will not yield benefits until at least next year. So I guess the other piece of advice I'd give to county commissioners is definitely take the long view and start thinking about how you can make those changes now, because they won't pay off for a while.
Thanks for listening to the County News Podcast and this year's series presented by the National Center for Public Lands Counties. You can listen to more interviews from the series at naco.org/podcast. Look out for our upcoming coverage of the Pelt Fly-In at naco.org/news.